Hello. Good morning. I am ill. I have a sickness. My immune system's got owies. um, I also have a child home ill from school with a different illness. It is a vomiting illness, and I hope that I do not get that one. This one is just a cold that a different child of mine had, and now I've gotten into the fullness of it. And I hope I didn't make my wife sick and everyone else sick because I went to an excellent concert last night. The Staves, highly recommended if you're not familiar with the Staves. Um, it's a British what kind of music is it? Uh, Rock, pop, very soulful harmonies. Because it's three sisters. This tour is just two of them because I think one of them had a baby or something. But they are really awesome, and the concert was good. It really made me appreciate their music even more, and their musicality and their orchestration because they were excellent. Anyhow, uh, since there's already a bunch of comments, I was just gonna read through some of these. I don't know how to say your name. Uh, Kaluna, Kaluna. Synchronicity. Wondering when I was gonna talk about this question. Well, this is a big question, and it's part of really how I think of things, and it's probably why I can seemingly say two things at the same time, because I kind of am. And we'll maybe get into that, but sorry, Jeremy, about conference calls. My bad. Parsons, I was trying to remember your first name the other day. It's not, what is your first name? It'll come to me. Uh, yeah. Paul said this, and I left a comment on it from Homeroom this morning. When you try to bring heaven down, you bring hell up. Which is true. I mean, it depends on how we're talking about that with your will, with the imposition of your will, because then you're in opposition to not my will, but your will, to the Marian, let it be to me according to your word thing. You're trying, yeah, you're in a double-minded way rather than an integrated, pure I way. And then you say, but as we flip this on its head, Paul, could we negate it when you try to bring heaven up, you bring hell down? Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Exactly, Mandy. Depends on how you're going to try to bring heaven down. That's precisely it. Um, all right. Yo, Tayo. What up, my G? I saw you were on the Twitters because I started some Twitter account, but I've never logged back in. And CW messaged me this morning and said he unfollowed me because I didn't follow him. And I'm like, I haven't logged back in, but I saw you're on there. Sourdough Neil. Did I get sick at a witch's coven? I wish. That'd be a better story. All right. Here we go. I'll just talk some instead of going through comments, and then I'll go back and look at comments. So I was interacting with Anselman. Anselman for a long time wasn't interacting with me in any comments anywhere because we had some tensions. Anselman doesn't like some of the things that I say. And that's the thing, right? Ansel Anselman cannot have the preference of liking the way that I say things, and I can have the preference of not liking the way that he frames things or speaks to things. But we need to have unity amidst diversity, I think, especially ideologically. That's maybe the most important kind of diversity. I don't know. What's the most important kind of diversity? Having ideological diversity, I think, is very important. But so Paul treated a live stream, one of mine, on should orthodoxy be evangelizing, I believe, one of those, and it was a really great conversation. But then there were many, many comments in PVK's video, and so I was interacting with some of those, and I was interacting with Anselman some and MJ, I believe. And man, I should actually probably just read the comment. And Jeremy, yeah, you were interacting with him. I mean, this is So yeah, to this point, I see this. Dude, no, Tayo told me he said you could do either, but he explicitly told me once Tayo, and I intentionally do that instead of Teo. Grizz, get off me. Um, okay, what was the comment? Let me see if I can find it quick. Because I want to just read it. But Jeremy, to your point, how he went off on you and writing things down kills them in some small way. See, I think you have to be able. This is a big thing that I like to talk about with Rollins or Todd McGowan and Hegel. This is a big point with Hegel. And I had a point illustrating this, or Jordan Daniel Wood and Maximus, identity of identity, non identity. Reality is non dual, which includes duality. McGilchrist says that. It's the non duality that includes duality. Um, and so, it's not, and it's not set against each other. It's not like right brain versus left brain, which is how a lot of people tend to talk about these things. Well, that was weird. I just looked down and saw myself doing the things I was just doing on my phone. Um, okay. So this comment was under Tello Flores 3597. So this was a comment nobody liked, is when I said that the Protestant's literalist medium is demonic at 19 minutes of Paul's video. Um, whoa, that's a long comment. I'm not going to read it all. But he was equating, well, I should, because it's good. I'll read it. He said, it reminded me of leaders in the Pentecostal church I grew up in warning us not to read the Bible too literally or else be possessed of evil, contrarian spirits. I think they're right. I think, excuse me, I think that's true. But I soon afterwards left the church in good terms after becoming a Calvinist and going to seminary. My conversion into what some might call a literalist reader of scripture started after reading John Piper's Don't Waste Your Life. The sentiment in that book is fantastic. I probably owned every Piper book there was. I got rid of them a while ago, but so I'm all about it. Particularly the chapter where Piper talks about C.S. Lewis and existentialism. I don't remember that. I read that chapter and immediately became a realist, grabbing the chair I was sitting on and finding myself for the first time fully convinced that it was an actual chair. Praise God. In that moment, was I possessed of a demonic spirit of Reformed theology? Quotes. I felt like my eyes had been opened like never before, but maybe I'm just deceived. So this is what I would say with the non-duality that includes duality, which allows you to say something. Like you can say something that's demonic, but it's not an absolutizing, totalizing thing that doesn't allow for the implicit in that. Because that's kind of Todd McGowan's point with his series on when he's talking about Hegel is anytime you predicate something, you say something. It's when you say something cataphatically, positively, you're including the opposite in it because you need the opposite to even make sense of it. Because when you say "Let there be light," well, light in contrast to what? You don't even know what light is if there's not darkness. Like total light is I don't the human mind just doesn't work without this contrast. It's baked into everything that you could say. When you say night, it's contrasted to day. And what is that verse in day is as night to him um in the scriptures. Am I gonna be able to find it quickly? Psalm 1. No, is it Psalm 1? That's not it. Day is as night to him. I only vaguely even the dark Psalm 1, 139. Even the darkness is not dark to you, is what I was going for. To you the night shines as bright as day, darkness and light are the same to you. That is the unity behind it. As I often say, Jason, my boy Almond Tree, was just quoting myself to me this morning, but he was saying It's essentially that. When it's to see the unity behind any distinction. Behind any distinction, there's a unity, which is, well, which is why I kind of like the Miaphysite way of framing things almost. Rather than leaning into the distinction, you lean into the unity. Um, and so, okay, let's go back to this quote. So that was Tello Flores, 3597. So when you became a Calvinist and you had this realization, this revelation of the chair as real, and you became a realist, not living in this divided world of natural, supernatural, spiritual, material, the one-story universe, as Father Stephen Freeman calls it. However that came to you, God bless it. That came up in oh, Chad had a little live stream video this morning. He was just thinking through his thoughts, and him and Michael were talking that I listened to while I made coffee. And because they were talking about, oh, what was it? No, maybe it was in Paul's PBK homeroom. That what do you call it? OnlyFans girl who became a Christian, and apparently a bunch of, I don't know, hyper fundamentalists were just like, no. One, and Paul read that quote, which was horrific in the video, of just like, if you've done this, there's just like no repentance for you and no coming back. I don't know. It was just very non-Christian, I would say, and then non-Christ-like. And then they were saying, riffing on, like, if Christ is preached, who cares? Like, they're casting out demons using someone's name, and Jesus is like, if they're not against us, they're for us. Like, it's fine, leave them alone. Um, Anyhow, all that to say, I don't. This is all trying to articulate that Christ plays an antichrist, because you can call something demonic, but then you forget, like, I don't. I believe in the reconciliation of the demons. And even in the Old Testament, there's verses about God sending an evil spirit to torment someone. So then what is that? That is God working through an evil spirit to accomplish his ends. And we see that it's throughout the entire Bible. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. Or this bad thing happened. It's like the Chinese farmer through the scripture. But then God uses it for good. Or it's like in the Silmarillion, when Melkor comes in and starts playing his own music that's in disharmony with the greater whole. But then Iluvatar weaves that in and melds it, and it's even a greater, it's a greater symphony because of the discordant notes. Um, there's always a higher unity. I would say logically, there's always a unity behind any distinction. There has to be. There cannot be any ultimate distinction. That is, where there's not a more fundamental unity, because that's what allows you to ever make the distinction. So that's kind of what it means by Christ plays an antichrist, is this broader idea. So to that comment, I said something. This Tello Flores, I said, Christ plays in 10,000 places, including Antichrist, death, and even hell, the harrowing of hell, trampling down death by death. Sin came into the world, and death through sin. And so then Christ entered into death, taking the consequence of sin onto himself, entered into death, redeeming death itself, making death the door to the new life, to new creation. He redeemed even death. He conquered death through integrating it. I mean, that's kind of what I take that to be. And then, so Anselman said, where do you take that saying/idea from? Are you quoting someone, or did you come up with it yourself? Um, it is certainly not scriptural. Well, I just tried to lay out how I think it is scriptural. Um, and do you care to spell what you mean by Christ playing an antichrist? Well, that's just what I've tried to do. So, the Christ Plays in 10,000 Places is the title of a book. I'm not sure. I think it's a Miroslav Volf book, I believe, that I read in my 2-week stint in seminary or whatever it was. Now, how I want to connect that to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is that I think Jesus, Jesus even in the New Testament said, I didn't come into the world to judge the world, for the world is condemned already. I came to save the world. And St. Paul, says, I don't judge you. I don't even judge myself. Like, that's God's job. The wheat and the chaff, or the wheat and the weeds grow up together. The wheat and the chaff, and they're sifted and separated at the end. Like, it's kind of, said this to Brandon Graham Dempsey when we spoke yesterday, and I said, but that's kind of, it's like that really poorly chosen lower back tattoo of only God can judge me, or wherever you decide to put it. Um, it's true. I think it's true, actually. Um, and then the whole mystery of Christ in me, I think that's what it means for us to judge the angels, is that when we are theosified, when Christ in me has come to its fullness or its perfection, when we have fully died and lived into what it means to be Christ to the world, fully giving of ourselves, for self-sacrificially taking up our cross and following him, to love the other, all the Sermon on the Mount stuff, then we will perhaps have a face, like C.S. Lewis says, till we have faces, to even know. That's what that whole book is about. Till you even know proper judgment. God, that book's so good, because the end. I mean, I don't want to give that book away. I mean, it's old. If people haven't read it, it's just excellent, and you should read it, because it is very, that book is written in a way that's very like Terrence Malick-y. It's meant to shape and change your perception of reality. And I think Lewis thought it was his best book. It's really good. I don't know that it's my favorite of his, but it's excellent. But until you have a face, you're not capable of judging, until you know who you are. Or perhaps whose you are, which is probably the same thing, knowing as you are known. 1 Corinthians 8, which is proper knowledge, which is the fullness, which is all the 4 P's in integration perfectly, which is personalist knowledge, the divine person. And so that gets into the judgment thing. I actually think that a lot of these judgments, falling into the binary of the dualism without the non-duality that should encompass that, like a Russian nested doll, we fall into these judgments, and we, be careful, you who judge, for in your judgment you condemn yourself. That's another Jesus quote. For you practice the same things. It's not our job to judge, at least not yet, until it's Christ in me, until God became man, that man should become God, Irenaeus. And when that has happened, then perhaps we are capable of judging properly. All right. I don't know how much voice I will have. And I'm talking to Peter later today. Pete. So I probably should save my voice. So I'm going to stop there and look at comments. Should I open it up for a little while? Let's do that. I will post it. Post the join me. And I will read comments. Ship clerk, hello. Amerto. I mean, this is what, so like, I think you're maybe still Mormon. I can't remember, you said that, or you were. And I know Jeremy was previously Mormon, right? Judging the world, perfected, theosified human beings judging the world is kind of a Mormon thing, huh? Wouldn't you say? Cassidy, what a treat. Gavin, hello.
Hi, Luke.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Welcome. Do you guys have thoughts as I read through these comments here?
No, I just wanted to join. I don't always have the chance to, and
Oh,
right now I have some downtime, so I figured I'd hop in.
excellent.
But nothing particular.
I just wanted
Excellent.
to say hey.
Hey, guys, you can just come to hang. Sam, welcome also. Why are you laughing?
My
Sam's
subtitle, I think.
Hopefully not the Antichrist. Well, even if you are, you could be the Antichrist that Christ uses, perhaps.
How do you know if you are?
That's why I said hopefully. I wasn't. I didn't want to come across as too confident.
Well, even that, like, that's the thing. How do you know that you are? That's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Like, those are things you shouldn't be worried about.
Maybe everybody is. Like, we could just go about it like that with some humility.
Well, isn't that kind of the Solzhenitsyn thing? The line of good and evil runs down both men, and that's even like the image that we have of Pinocchio or whatever, like the angel on this side and the demon on this side, which apparently came from Maximus. Like that's what he was kind of talking about, which I would call like the true self, false self, Merton. I mean, this is a very robust
When
tradition.
Paul Vanderklay picks on the people who say secret sacred self, and I've started thinking it's like maybe that's the Antichrist, is the secret sacred self. And we need to stop caring so much about what we want, because that secret sacred self is the devil.
I think in the sense that Paul uses it, yeah, that's just like the subjective that's just closed in on itself, that thing. Anyhow, I'm just looking at comments, guys. Oh, I never want to put up things when people compliment me. Only when they say bad things. That's what I put up. But good morning, bad comedy. What is your name? I should know your name, your real name. Ooh, that's a great line by the way, from I love to talk about music I love. I should just have streams where I talk about things that I love. But I've been really liking this guy called Medium Build. That's his stage. But he had an interview once where he said one of his favorite lyrics, and it's in a great song. But he has this line that just says, "Say my name, say my real name," and it's just like this love song. It's such a great line. Anyhow, Chunji, what's up?
Hey man, that
Hey.
was something that. Yeah, I saw the title and I had to click on the video today. I think you hinted to something that I asked you the last time about the problem of non-duality.
Yeah.
And I didn't read that comment, but I was kind of also, a little bit triggered every time you say, Christ playing AntiChrist, because it's a weird thing to say, And
Luke says weird things.
Yes. Why? That's why we are here listening. If it wasn't that weird, it was not that interesting. But my point, I think that there's a couple of points, if you allow me to make.
Yeah, do it.
One is, for instance, you about the non-duality issue. You read kind of a passage about. It doesn't matter the specific passage, but it's a good example. For me, the psalmist says, for me, the day has become like the night.
Yeah, Psalm 139.
So that's he's not talking about transcending non-duality and achieving unity. He's talking about blindness. Now, I don't want to make that. I'm saying that as an example of our possibility or way to approach to the reality of sorry, I repeat myself, of reality being and God being at the same time, dualistic and non-dualistic at the same time. Because there is, at least for me as a Christian, I know that I should not talk about non-duality, because there is a part where it's not an intuition of the mind. It's not a rational reasoning. It's maybe some kind of revelation that we have from God that is beyond everything that is made. But every time that we try to explain it or to speak about it, we end up confusing blindness for illumination, because kind of by definition we don't have not the means or the capacity to speak about those things, and every time that we speak about the things, we make terrible mistake and confusion. Speaking of the divine darkness, for instance, the holiness of God that is beyond our capacity to imagine or to describe what holy even is. But we have this revelation that kind of there must be God beyond anything. But every time that we look at darkness, and this is what is not just it's just not a theoretical thing. It becomes it has become an historical philosophical fact. Every time somebody tries to contemplate that darkness, you end up confusing the darkness above with the darkness below. So because there is there is the system itself of non-duality, duality, a darkness above and below. But because we cannot absolutely reach or imagine or contemplate the one above, we end up contemplating the one below. So you end up like the philosopher who, the contemplative, the mystic who jump into the lake trying to grasp the reflection of the moon and drown himself. Everyone who has done this leap, this philosophical leap, has ended up drowning himself in that lake, confusing what is above or what is below. So I understand that there is a non-duality things, but that is not, by definition, is what it is. What is not revealed to us, and we are dualistic. We are. Everything is dualistic for us since the time of creation, in the way that we have been created. Our brain, left, right, up and down, man, woman, and
Matt, I'd just like to
those
disagree.
Yeah,
there
it's
is-
okay, but let me finish my point. So we comprehend things through a dualistic system because we have been created in this way to understand the world where we are. And Jesus then finally, he also revealed himself in the cross and indicating what is since the tree of the knowledge of good and evils. It's what is on my right side, what is on my left side, what is up that is God, what is down that is not God. So even the revelation of Jesus itself is as the way that we have to approach it is to a basic dualistic frame of vision. That is not denying that there is non-duality. I'm just saying that at some point, every time that we say something that aspire to be non-dualistic, we end up 100% of the time saying things that are kind of problematic, to say the least.
Right. Well, Gavin, I want to hear what you have to say, but it reminds me of a perennialism debate that Yosef shared a while ago that between a couple different Jewish guys on perennialism. And so like this is why I like the McGilchrist thing of non-duality that includes duality, because if your non-duality just becomes another dualism, well, then you've fallen into your own trap. You're hoisted on your own petard or whatever. So yeah, I get that point, Gavin.
Yeah, my wife and I were talking about categories and language itself. It's like, there's no way that in one moment I can do something that would teach my child everything they need to know. And there's no word, there's nothing I could say that's going to be able to capture like the entire truth. It's like, that's just what we're playing with. That's what we're dealing with. We're never going to be able to do the thing that is complete or say the thing that is going to capture the entire truth. I mean, that's what we're playing in this world. But, we have children. And so we come up with this, we use language and categories and try, even though we know we're going to have to keep trying. But we're always going to, no matter what we do, we're always going to have to do more. And no matter what we say, there's always going to be something that's unsaid that can still be said.
Yeah, it reminds me like the Jordan Daniel Wood talking about his wife, because I think this isn't just God or knowledge. Everything is this way. Everything is simultaneously known and not known. Because like Jordan Daniel Wood will say with his wife, he's just like, there's things about her and Paul will say this kind of stuff all the time. This is my experience with anybody I've known. They'll do something all of a sudden that's really confusing to you, and that doesn't mean that you don't know them. Of course you know them. You know them incredibly well, but you don't know them in a way that completely encapsulates and contains it, that turns it into a static idol. Nothing works that way.
Right.
Okay. So, but let's clarify this a little bit, because
He's going to do it.
Is there a category of duality between knowable and not knowable?
Well, knowable and this is why Polanyi. I love to talk about Polanyi. If you mean knowable in like a conscious self-awareness, articulable, propositional sense, if that's how you're talking about knowledge.
In any sense, even imaginable, or at any level, whatever level you want to put it.
But there's all this, these are, because there's all these kinds of knowledge, you know, there's like the 4 Ps, and I mentioned this, I don't know when it will come out, but whatever. Huh?
I mean, I think he has a point too, Luke. I think y'all both have points on this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I share something?
Yeah.
I just read The Great Divorce again, and I feel like it all hits a lot of these points over and over again. So I was just going to read some of the preface real fast for the book.
Beautiful.
Okay, here we go. The preface. Blake wrote The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. If I have written their divorce, this is not because I think myself a fit antagonist for so great a genius, nor even because I feel at all sure that I know what he meant. But in some sense or other, the attempt to make the marriage is perennial. The attempt is based on the belief that the reality never presents us with an absolute unavoidable either or, that granted skill and patience, and above all, time enough, some way of embracing both alternatives can always be found, that mere development or adjustment or refinement will somehow turn evil into good without our being called on for a final and total rejection of anything we should like to retain. This belief I take to be a disastrous error. You cannot take all luggage with you on all journeys. On one journey, even your right hand and right eye might be among the things you have to leave behind. We are not living in a world where all roads are radii of a circle, and where all, if followed long enough, will therefore draw gradually nearer and finally meet at the center. Rather, in a world where every road, after a few miles, forks into 2, and each of those into 2 again, and at each fork you must make a decision. Even on the biological level, life is not like a pool, but like a tree. It does not move towards unity, but away from it. And the creature grows further apart as they increase in perfection. Good, as it ripens, becomes continually more different, not only from evil, but from other good. I do not think that all who choose wrong paths perish, but their rescue consists in being put back on the right road. A wrong sum can be put right, but only by going back till you find the error and working it afresh from that point, never by simply going on. Evil can't be undone, but it cannot develop into good. Time does not heal it. The spell must be unwound bit by bit, with backwards mutters of dissevering power, or else not. It is still either or. If we are to insist on keeping hell, or even on earth, we shall not see heaven. If we are to accept heaven, we shall not be able to retain even the smallest and most intimate souvenirs of hell. I believe to be sure that any man who reaches heaven will find that what he abandoned, even in plucking out his right eye, was precisely nothing. That the kernel of what he was really seeking, even in his most depraved wishes, will be there, beyond expectation, waiting for him, in the high countries. In that sense, it'll be true for those who have completed the journey, and for no others, to say that good is everything and heaven everywhere. But we, at the end of the road, must not try to anticipate the retrospective vision. If we do, we are likely to embrace the false and disastrous converse and fancy that everything is good and everywhere is heaven. But you will ask of earth. Earth, I think, will not be found by anyone to be in the end a very distinct place. I think earth, if chosen instead of heaven, will turn out to have been, all along, only a region of hell. And earth, if put second to heaven, will have been from the beginning a part of heaven itself.
What? Can I point something out? Because maybe I understand that there is some misunderstanding in the category, because it seems like we can say that the opposite of duality is unity. That would be a categorical error. some I
You freeze up. I don't know. I wouldn't say it's the opposite. But anyhow, I want to open it up for
You
other
see-
people to say things. Sam or Kezi. Kezi, you're like our great pocket guru. You can just
I
come
don't
in
think that we should aspire to get quite as many comments if PVK reposts this conversation, Luke. We generated a fair amount of comments the last time we talked. But something I've been thinking about, and like, you know, Jacob constantly poking about like the, I don't know, moral goodness of the crucifixion, say. And like, isn't human sacrifice a bad thing? Well, it's like, that's related to this. It's like, yes, it is a bad thing. And
Yes.
I do think that there's something interesting and important about the fact that in the crucifixion story, it wasn't actually the Jews that did the crucifying, right? He was crucified by the unclean people because did a human need to be sacrificed? It turned out yes. So, but is that a bad thing to do? Yes. So how do you solve the puzzle of having a necessary bad thing? And that's sort of like what the role of Antichrist is that, you know, this needed to happen, but woe to whom through whom it happens. That idea that there are some purposes of God that require almost an evil actor, but it doesn't mean the actor is an evil. And it's not like they won't get judgment on them, woe to him through whom it happens. But they still have a role to play. And like the crucifixion is just full of that sort of thing.
Yeah, is the crucifixion good or bad?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, good luck answering that question. Is exactly right. And then the Antichrist is a similar sort of idea.
Right. It's almost like it's the antidote to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil good or evil?
Yeah.
Certainly caused a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But yeah. So like that, I think you kind of alluded to this passage. There's the passage in 1 Corinthians 5 where there's the guy who has married his stepmom. And then Paul is not pleased about this guy who has married his stepmom being in the church. And he says, you are to deliver this man to Satan for the destruction of the flesh, so that his spirit may be saved in the day of the Lord. So Paul is instructing them to throw this person out of the church and hand them over to Satan. But it's not just like for vengeance or something like that.
Like
or
it's for
just
love.
Right. But the right thing to do with someone who is in a state of wickedness like that is to give them to Satan. But the goal, hopefully, is that his spirit might be saved by, you know, the bad things that happened to him at the hands of Satan might cause some sort of change of heart or repentance or redemption or sanctification or something. So even Satan can play a role in sanctification, which is similar to that idea of the Romans being the ones who need to crucify Jesus or something like that.
Right, Sam. But first off, I hope all you guys are doing very well. That autonomy, right, that Satan has, right, is that ultimately stemming from God, or is he free reign, right? This goes back to Job and the whole story of Job, obviously dealing with this tension of evil. And God also answers Job, like, where were you when I created the universe, right? When I did this, like, how are you even going to be able to comprehend this kind of tension? And when you talk about Antichrist, and Maimonides like alludes to this when he talks about Jesus and Muhammad being like path makers, right? Like we could call it a necessary evil. However, those are human terms. They're in the sense in Kabbalistic terms, it's called the Sitra Achra, the other side, or the Klipa, which is the peel. And in the sense is these things are evil or are bad as far as we're concerned and the way we perceive them. However, ultimately this too is for the good. Eventually the good will be revealed from within it, right? So just like a fruit, eventually you have to take off the peel to enjoy the fruit. Here too, we are still living in a world of the shell. And in the shell, we get to experience things that seem evil. We would also have to, we would have to separate between evil that's being done by humans and by other people, and evils that happens due to an earthquake or a meteor, right? And then those are two different aspects of evil and how we relate to those things. There's a sense also where even when something like that happens, there's also a question of how do we respond to that, right? So when Aaron loses both of his sons, he remains silent. And that silence is, in a certain way, echoes the silence that God demands from the angels. There's a midrash where I mentioned this in the past, where there's the 10 martyrs. One of them is being killed. It's very, very graphic and horrible. And the angels, the divine council, ask God, is this Torah and this is its reward? This was a great sage. How is this happening? And God responds to them, silence. Be silent. If you say another word, I will destroy. If you say another word, I will destroy the world. And there's a sense where angels don't understand this tension, but God wants us and is interested in seeing how this tension plays out. However, it is upon us to know when to be silent, and that silence could be a very holy silence as well. So I would agree with you what you were saying about the Antichrist, and again, like calling it a necessary evil. But I would stress the fact that the Satan's machinations or involvement in that too stems from the what?
Agreed.
There is you for sure all remember the story of Adam and Eve and the fall in Genesis 2 and 3. And,
Rings a bell.
Yes, and there is a detail in when finally God confronted Adam and Eve about taking of the fruit. Adam answers first, says, "The woman that you gave me passed me the fruit, basically." And then the woman says, "It's I was stricken by the snake." In parentheses, that you let in this garden for some reason. So, for me, that is a very I get to the bottom of the matter, answering kind of a moral question in that story. And there is a part that what Adam and Eve are doing is, saying, I'm not really responsible for what I did. And even to the point that Adam says, the woman that you gave me. So if you didn't give the woman, that would not have happened. And the same for the woman. If the snake wasn't here, why did you? You made him more, I don't know, smarter or craftier, as crafty as the snake. I will not be deceived. So, at the end of the day, logically speaking, you, God, are responsible for the sin of mankind. And the question is, do we agree with Adam and Eve, or we agree with God? Because I think they disagree at that point. They disagree
I agree with the icon of the resurrection where Jesus is pulling Adam and Eve out of the grave.
Yes,
that's what I agree with.
But where is the power there of the resurrection? What is the power of the atonement? Or if I dare to say, the substitutionary atonement is that God was not responsible for what Adam and Eve did, but He took on Himself the consequence of the choice of Adam, of humanity as a whole. So He took upon Himself the innocent for the guilty, or the righteous for the sinner. And that's the power of redemption. That's the atonement. He did not redeem himself at the cross. He took the responsibility for what humanity did, even if he didn't have to. He did not have to do that, but he did it. So that's yeah.
Can
That's
I
the
comment
question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
go
want to say
ahead.
something quick because this is going to be in line with what you were saying. I think is that ultimately, like what Hezi was saying before, I very much agree and agree with. And then it's oh, I lost it. Go ahead, Hezi.
Okay, so no surprise. Obviously, I don't. I don't. My theology doesn't require someone to die for our sins for repentance. Obviously, we could always repent, but within the context of the Garden of Eden, the issue is, well, first of all, we can take a step back. God created the universe, right? So ultimately, it all comes back to Him, right? It's His fault. To Him the glory. But once Adam and Eve are around, or specifically, when God is creating the earth, or the world, He's always saying, "And it was good, and it was good, and it was good." The only time He said it wasn't good is when He notices the man is by himself, right? It's not good that the man is alone. That's the first time we see no good. And then we have Eve. The issue is, and that is sort of alluding to the fact that even the two came from the one, right? Eve is coming out of Adam. And there's a recognition that while two could have a child and then be like the creator and be like one again, and also two of them ultimately are one. But what the problem is with Adam is he's creating this duality, right? He's saying, like, listen, you brought her to me. This is not my fault. What do you want from me? And that's sort of the issue. When God also asks, where are you? And they're hiding. They don't answer. They're clearly not recognizing what is being asked of them and the responsibility they have. And Adam stuttering and blaming his wife, so to speak, is not realizing that you guys are supposed to be unified. You guys are supposed to be one. That even the bad thing that happened to you, if you handle it together with your wife, there could be a different conversation that happens over there. And a lot of it stems into communication, which we see there is failed communication between Adam and Eve. There's failed communication between Cain and Abel, and on and on and on, all the way till Joseph. So ultimately, lack of communication and lack of discernment could sometimes confuse someone and make someone think that there is a separation and there's a difference. And then I think that's where we start getting into trouble. It's very hard to demand someone, of course, to constantly be thinking. And this is why I think Maimonides fails, if I could say that. He's obviously a great sage and I'm nothing. But, but I'm saying that Maimonides fails because ultimately, he says evil that happens between man and man, between humans, that's ultimately humans' fault. They're creating that evil. And hurricanes, that is just part of nature. And God has really removed himself in a certain sense from nature. There's a side element, which is like divine providence, but that is very specific to specific people. I find that lacking and not very uplifting. But I do genuinely believe that while we discuss duality, ultimately there's a non-duality.
Luke, I have a question about penal substitutionary atonement.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I mean, it depends. The definition of penal substitutionary atonement is somewhat evasive because at some level you can say Christ died for our sins. All right. Okay. Dying certainly seems like a punishment for there's a substitution, sins go away, atonement. Right. Okay. So like, that's a very simplistic definition of penal substitutionary atonement. Some people, especially Calvinists, will be like, God had to come so that God could pour his wrath out on God so that we don't get the wrath of God because God's wrath fell on God or something like that. Almost like the sort of angry father who needs a vengeance appeasement or something like that. And that seems to be a slightly different definition. But I think that we can say that, like, isn't punishment itself almost sort of like it's like the Christ playing the AntiChrist thing, that punishment itself is playing part of like the role where even sort of like anger and wrath itself gets sort of like used in a redemptive purpose. And I feel like there is a way probably that you could get penal substitutionary-ish in the way that wouldn't make you uncomfortable.
Well, it's more just the penal, I think, is it's smuggling in a lot of baked in assumptions about the nature of our relationship to God, and that it's primarily judicial, and that it has to do with it's this hyper moralizing of everything in a very like legal framework, whereas I think the much better framework is God is Father. God is someone who loves you the way that
Well, a legal framework isn't completely useless.
No, I know
mean,
it's not. I know it's not completely useless.
Right,
It's
like as long as you don't over
Yeah.
prioritize it or something like that. I mean,
It
because
would be
Jesus
like-
was. There is a trial. There are judges. There is
Yeah.
it is a legal proceeding, an
But I think
unjust
God
one,
is
but there
much
is a legal
more-
thing.
God is much more like I would say he's much more like a physician, or he's much more like a loving father, or saying like, a father disciplines them who he loves. And George MacDonald talks very much about how discipline, punishment, and mercy is the same thing. It's just viewed from different angles.
Well, I think that's what Sam was mentioning. I believe, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but saying some of that punishment, that anger, is really, we see it as anger, but actually, it in its truer form, it's even a version of mercy, right? When a father sometimes says no, that doesn't mean he's saying no to us. But I would just say, with regards to the legal perspective of this, and obviously from a Jewish perspective, we have a lot of those. However, in the book of Leviticus, the way it starts, Leviticus starts with, and he called. And our sages say off the bat, what is this call? And it says, before the laws, before the commandments, before everything, there is a constant call of love that God is reaching out to us. That is first. Then everything else comes later. But that's all happening within that context. And I think when Jesus is calling out, as many rabbis have called out the Pharisees, and saying, that you're, these purity laws, but at the end of the day, like you're not actually focusing on the essence of it. Of course, if those things get decoupled, then very quickly they could look like an angry father and vengeful father and someone that's penalizing me. But it's very important to constantly remember that that's not the relationship and the context that it's coming from, right? As the Bible obviously tells us that God creates day, light and darkness, and good and evil. All these things are his creation. And in a sense, there is the beginning of the book of Job, right? When God seemingly speaks to Satan, right? There's a Kabbalistic play of words over there as well. God asks Satan, where did you come from? And in Hebrew, it's me'ain bata. Me'ain is the ain, is the infinity, is the sense where he's coming from that place. But God is allowing Satan to partake in and removes his shielding over Job. But ultimately, there's the end of the book of Job as well, right? Where it all gets returned to him, it all comes back. And thinking about it as an allegory, right? This tension that Job has is seen also with his children. And his children constantly having these parties every day, and him feeling like he needs to sacrifice something just to make sure he has all his bases covered is an indication of someone that is realizing that his children are not realizing how this world actually works, and he himself is very nervous about that as well. And then we get to see it played out in his own life, right? These tensions themselves get played out in his life as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of that I think is great, and my understanding of judgment and justice and all these things is best illustrated by George MacDonald's Justice Sermon. I think he lays it out perfectly. And I don't like Philippas had this comment, like, do you believe in purgatory? This came up in Paul's conversation today. He made some comment about hell, and really it's really you have to, the question is it the fire of hell or whatever that is, which people would say is metaphorical because it's probably not literal fire. But is it purifying fire? So like fire purifies gold, burning off the chaff, those kinds of biblical illusions, or is it destroying fire, annihilating fire? Is it just burning it to nothing? Or is it just a unending torturing fire? Punishment viewed merely as punitive, penal torture forever. Because those are the three different historic views of hell. Those three things. And they're
Why not all three?
Huh?
Why not all three?
Well, you can't simultaneously torture someone forever in a punitive way and have it be refining, because then you're torturing someone who's being refined into the image
Yeah,
of
sure.
God.
Okay, well then I'll just pick the first two. All right.
And
It
you
can be
would.
destructive if there is no if someone's just chaff.
Then the problem that I have is like, what is that will that is choosing against its own good forever? And is it a good for God to create something that can choose against its own good forever? And how does that exist?
It has been said some pots were made for destruction and some pots were made for glorification.
Keep reading. Read
What?
through chapter 11 and 12. You got to read.
I've read all of Romans
Chapter 11.
a couple times, but yeah.
I'm wondering, and I don't know how people will see this. So the day of the Lord in Jewish writing, Yom Kippur is referred to as Yoma, the day, and so I think that day, the day of judgment, is supposed to be related to atonement, and in the atonement, there's the blood was put on the objects so that they could be used. So the horns of the altar, the blood would be sprinkled on all the objects. And I'm wondering what role, because I think in Revelation, Jesus appears as the high priest. I think that's the image of the gold crown, of the golden sash. That's the high priestly garment, and the presenting of the blood. To what extent, like we don't think of objects or like this physical world needing blood on it to be used again, but in both the temple and the tabernacle, the blood was necessary for those objects to be able to have life themselves. Hezi, am I way off?
No, you're not way off at all, which is always impressive and enjoyable to hear. I would say, though, that, and not only in the Day of Atonement in the tabernacle, also Moses puts blood on the earlobes as well, and on the finger,
and on the
toe.
thumb. Yep.
Right, exactly. There's a lot of symbolism specifically on those paces. That's for a separate conversation. Specifically the blood, though, and all the things that happen in the temple. We spoke about this in the past. That, to me, is really symbolic of taking nature's forces and having them done within proper orientation and context in the tabernacle / the temple. So whether it's incense or creating an altar or having blood, which are things that are completely, and even having the cherubs, right, which are idols. None of that can happen outside the tabernacle or outside the temple, right? All those things have to happen only in there. And putting it on the earlobes and putting it on the priest in general is sort of turning the priest himself into the altar in that sense, right? It's because,
So I agree, but in Second Temple Jewish literature, I think it's also in Zohar and also in the New Testament, it's spoken of the structure of the temple is the structure of the universe. And so if the temple to be used, if the earth is like one of the sections of the temple, in what way is blood put on the earth for the earth to be able to contain God's presence as well? That occurred, like that construction, even the notion of the third heaven or fall in the Merkava mysticism, falling into the third heavens. So to what extent these objects have blood applied to them as they do in scripture, where might that happen elsewhere? And part of why I think, by the way, as Christians, we miss a lot of this stuff is we see Jesus primarily as a Davidic Messiah, not as the priestly Messiah that the New Testament is pretty obsessed with, as Jesus as priest.
Oh, I see Alan joined as well as the whole group. Before we jump too deep into this, I know Cassidy has been patiently quiet. So I just want to make sure that our Wonder Woman has, or if she wants to share something, she should feel comfortable to do so.
Listen, you
I-
guys, I'm such a feminist. Cassie can speak for herself. She's a strong Anyman Angel.
I'm a strong,
Yeah.
independent woman.
Yeah,
I
and
need
let
no
me
leaders.
reaffirm
Only I
how
can
how
speak.
much I support Cassidy. Could you stop talking, Cassidy, for a moment? And she's
Perfect
so
timing.
important to this conversation. And when I let her speak, it's going to be unbelievable. Sorry.
Feminism abounds.
Well, I'll put myself in my womanly place and say anything I have to add to this conversation will probably be lesser than what the men have to contribute at this time. So
Oh, thank
I
you.
put myself in a corner.
She pays attention to the Bible. Women should be quiet when church is happening. So
I'm just over here playing with the babies. It's fine. Taking in the wisdom of the men.
David, I'll just say one thing, and then anyone else could join in. That the temple is really supposed to be an 8th day creation, and we also told in the Bible we're also told that the ceremony of the tabernacle is on the 8th day, and that's sort of reference of, you know, all of us are still in this 7th day that God didn't finish. He's resting, and we're doing that, and we're all trying to move towards the 8th day. And an 8th day structure cannot actually remain very long in the 7th day world, and hence it keeps on getting destroyed. However, within this 8th day structure, we try to bring into it these 7th day forces. So whether it be smell or blood, which again symbolizes, and you know, in ancient times people would bathe in blood, right? That's what it symbolizes. The life force. So that's really, as far as in generally speaking, in our theology, that's really as far as it goes. You could play with it a little longer, a little more if you want to, but once you start bringing it into, well, again, it's not a secret how, you know, where I feel where Jesus belongs in here, but I guess that's as far as I could go with.
Well,
with that,
that 8th day is also related to resurrection, though, right? Like the leper will present himself for 7 days to the priest, washing himself, and then on the 8th day he'll be considered a new flesh. A woman on her period, unclean for 7 days. The washing of the self, which symbolizes death, right?
Yep.
Death and rebirth, full immersion in the waters of mikvah, and then will be considered a new flesh. Circumcision on the 8th day. Jesus rises on the 1st day, but also if you count back, like the 1st day is also the 8th day, or the new day. And so if it's all related to resurrection, and I agree, because the people don't know this, one of the feasts, the feast of Sukkot, of Tabernacles, when it was a special year, would be 8 days, and that's when we're in the presence of God, right? So resurrection, in the presence of God, the 8th day. But then if all these things are related to the 8th day, new creation, and that's related to the blood being sprinkled on the holy items, in what way is this world, the items of this world, sprinkled with blood?
it's just that last part that I'm not sure I'm understanding. I'm sorry. I was with you up until all the connections you were making. Sure, I'm with you. And then?
So
just that final part. The question itself is these 7th day elements.
So one of the notions within the Jewish literature is the idea that the world in and of itself is unclean. And so there is the items that are in this world are being, it's not about sin. I want to make sure that I'm being clear about this. But the item, even the horns of the altar, the bronze altar, the altar of incense, must have blood put on them so that they can be used at all. Okay. And one of the messianic figures, right, the 4 craftsmen, one of those craftsmen is Melchizedek, the righteous priest. And sometimes identified with Metatron, sometimes whatever. but these items, if all of the items are symbolizing the world, and all these items, in order to be used, must have blood applied, then how could it not be that there is blood to be applied to the items of the world if one of the major messianic figures in Judaism is a priest? How could he be a priest and a high priest if the major role of the high priest is doing these things? How could it not be the case?
I don't agree. I don't disagree with you.
You don't disagree. Okay. So then how?
And more than that,
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
elements you just, all those connections you made with the eighth day and the resurrection, correct. So like there is a lot of similarities, obviously.
Right.
My point, obviously, it will come to. I could only be so flexible with the concept of Jesus at the end of the day, or at least
right.
what I feel comfortable with. So yeah, I see those connections that you're making. I would understand how it would make sense to someone.
Do you think, Kezi, do you think from your experience in Judaism, and I mean, this is a crappy question, so I apologize in advance, but I'm curious, and I think this is a brave space. Do you think Jewish people are in a potentially unhealthy way indoctrinated against being open to perspectives on Jesus?
Well, let's put aside that he's God, right? Everything else in that 1,000%. Yeah. Like, I mean, it's built on 2,000 years. There's so much trauma, right? Crusades, death, persecution. So there's all that built in.
Right.
There's clearly the tension in second temple period where I only think now people are starting to realize that it is a ongoing, or at least at the time, it was an ongoing live conversation responding to each other, Christianity and Judaism at those earlier stages. And dealing with ideas of two powers in heaven, dealing with ideas of that Rabbi Akiva himself were potentially playing around with these ideas. So at some point, once we picked a lane, it's very important then, or historically, to sort of maintain the community. So for many years, while I talk about a theological and a legalistic, a halachic exoskeleton we built ourselves in exile, some of that also includes our aversion towards Muslims and Christians, and it's very, very difficult to take off that exoskeleton that already defined you. There are, of course, rabbis that were engaging, and like you were roughly 1,000 years ago, but that the reality was that wasn't something that could actually be promulgated at the time, for mainly for political reasons, and also due to the fear of intermarriage, etc., etc. We are in a magical time today. So I say this ad nauseum, that like this conversation would have been crazy to have had like this forever ago. It was happening. I think the church fathers and the rabbis in their teachings were sort of responding to each other in a certain way when they were writing these things. But yes, if this conversation would make many people feel uncomfortable in my community, and one-on-one I could tease it out as like a community, that it would be a mistake
Fourth
for me.
Century. Sorry,
go ahead. It would be a mistake for me.
Fourth century.
To like publicize this live.
Yeah. I mean, Judaism has been living, at least European Judaism has been living in a Christian world for 1,500 years.
Right.
And it's been experiencing conversion loss to Christianity that whole time. Some amount of conversion gain, but probably more loss than gain over the long haul. And so the versions of Judaism that still exist have extremely strong antibodies against conversion loss to Christianity. And like it's also true that like Protestants have like these little sayings that oftentimes religious communities that live next to other religious communities that they're scared of losing their people to have these various sayings, short little things that get caught in people's heads that help prevent conversion loss, like, oh, those Catholics, they worship Mary, and things like that, like shorthand things that probably have some amount of truth and some amount of lie in them. And Catholics have their own thing. Like, if you ask people that have been super sheltered Catholics what they think of Protestantism, you will get these shorthand little quips, right, that are meant to prevent a Catholic person from ever being curious about Protestantism. And Judaism has tons of those things that I've experienced in my relationship with Jewish people in terms of what they think and what they know and what they rumor whisper about Christianity when the Christians aren't listening and stuff.
Well, I'm going to double click on this point, Sam, because what both of you said is fantastic. But then, so in PVK's treatment of the live stream yesterday or whatever, MJ and Anselman kept going back and forth. They couldn't understand why I want Sam to talk to Gavin so much, and why I'm such a fan of that, and why I think it's such a good thing. Because there's like, Luke, you're a Trinitarian. Why do you want this Unitarian to be talking to Gavin? Shouldn't you be on Team Gavin? And I'm just like, you guys still don't understand what I'm doing. You guys don't understand what this is, I don't think. I'm not for ideological tribalism. I'm for personalist knowing. And I love Sam.
Well, you think that I'm like a Satan figure who can help torture some of these overly propositional Protestants.
There is that. Is that you're a foil, I think, to point out the inconsistencies in aspects of Protestantism. You dang right. There is that aspect of it. But it's also that I truly believe, too, that what this community is a relational space, and that is based in the person, and we talk about ideas and we do it in such a way that is open, that allows us to really think together out loud and let the cards fall where they may, instead of a zero-sum ideological game.
That's not a community then. I mean, what you're describing then, and I was just recently talking about this with Yosef, which is, and this came up from your stream when I heard Lance talking to you guys, and then he mentioned Lance was talking to some other group, and he said, I'm being TLC wherever I go. And I was wondering if that's a more proper way of looking at it. Is TLC is more of a mindset, a posture, a way of thinking, less of like a community. They're not mutually exclusive, but I think like what's happening in the space, and it's apropos our conversation right now, which is, can all these tensions be held, and can love still be shared and the space still be shared, right? So Sam and a Jew and a Trinitarian and an Orthodox. So you have all that conversation, and like you said, but I still love Sam. And well,
an Orthodox, a Jew, and a Unitarian walk into a bar.
Exactly. But it's funny that you're saying, but that's used as a joke because, I mean, we have a comedian over here. He'll let us know. But because it's almost comical to think of that being our actual reality. What we're doing right now is actually turning that into a reality, which is not one that's humorous. It's not, of course, it's joyful, but it's not necessarily a punchline or a joke. It's more about a manifesting reality, and I think it's two-tiered because in a certain way, I get a lot of love in this corner, yet you would think that between the Christians there would be even a tighter grouping. Yet sometimes I feel that like there's more tension between like Sam and a Calvinist than there is between me and Sam. So like, which is very interesting to me, and I think that this is not true about Christianity in large, but definitely in the TLC, where people are playing with removing those veils and still managing to see each other as truly Christian.
It's interesting though, because Hezi, I think that your difference makes it so that people don't take your disagreement personally, right? I remember my sister saying that she was really looking forward to when she moved out of my parents' house so that she could get along with them. Is that there's a certain amount of closeness that relates to a grinding that there's a difficulty in this of like, if I see your perspective is so different from me, it's not a threat, then it's just interesting or entertaining or whatever, right? And so there's this back and forth of how close to create a grinding. I mean, even in the language that I was using, I didn't want to use too explicit language that the Zohar uses, because that's sometimes considered pornographic, for lack of a better term, where it's like how much intimacy, how close before that closeness is a friction, where it's like, I find, Sam, we've never talked before, but I find a lot of the material of people who are really poking and prodding my own tradition so important. And it's this like, how close do you allow and how much grinding? Because there's no, like, I've experienced no grinding from Hindus, none whatsoever, because I find it so different from my own tradition, if that makes sense. Like the family conflict is much more intense than the conflict I have with a stranger.
I find this space so weird that I keep asking myself, what is it that we owe each other in what we're doing here? And I don't have a good answer. But that's just the question that keeps plaguing my mind. What do we owe each other? Because, I even thinking of like the sort of interaction that happened between Luke and Sam on the Orthodoxy live stream.
There was some grinding in that one.
Yeah, I don't think we owe each other politeness. I don't think we necessarily owe each other, like placating where we think somebody else is wrong. But there is something about owing each other at least some relational aspect to make this sort of play that we're doing safe in the chaos that is YouTube and the internet, out in the outside and sometimes even inside this corner. So it's like, what do we owe each other, and how do we manifest that in the way we create, the way we consume, and then the way we commune about those things?
Yeah, maybe disagreeing well, because that's the thing. I've had lots of very impassioned disagreements with people over the years in TLC, and I can think of some of them felt completely fine. Like at the end of the day, I didn't just constantly think about it and feel horrible about the interaction. Like that one with Sam, I didn't think anything about. It was great. I know Sam is for me. But then there are people who disagree with me, for example. It doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel like they really love me. It doesn't feel like they're for me. It feels like they're angry at me.
Does Anselman love you, Luke?
I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for it. It doesn't feel like he likes me very much.
Ditto.
The connection I've been making is to like Mr. Rogers. That's kind of where my mind has gone like recently, is seeing the way that he was able to connect with people very different from him. And also people who are, incredibly intelligent, but then also children, and somehow being able to speak in a way simply to everyone in a respectful way, and really listened, like looked at people in the eye and really paid attention and made sure that the person he was talking to is like being paid attention to.
Yeah.
And that was the way he expressed love. And I think that kind of comes back. Like it's not even about the way you argue or anything. It's like just the treatment of people. And there's not like a good guidebook to it, but it's something that I want to at least try to emulate in whatever way I can.
He's a good model. I cried at that movie. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Do not have any debt with each other except but love. Paul says. So I own you love. Not much less, not much more.
I wonder what that love looks like, though, because again, like maybe this is just me, but in a relationship, I see it again like the atonement is that even just being in this world, things become filthy, things break down. And so this idea that in order even for a friendship to be maintained requires a forgiveness, requires a rejuvenating aspect of it, and that is in and of itself a kind of a kind of difficulty. Like you celebrate you fulfill Yom Kippur by strickening your soul for a day, right? And so to what extent that is also what's required between different groups of people, like an extension of forgiveness, or even an extension of assuming good faith, I think is also that. It's like, I am going to let myself be played by you is an extension of good faith. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I'm going to operate as though you're not lying. Okay, you want to trick me now? Go ahead.
Yeah. Being willing to lose and die in every regard. Yes.
Yeah, and I think the question you asked, David, is the question that I ask, because love's the easy answer. It's like, oh yeah, love, but what does that mean? What does that look like? It's going to be different in each situation, which with each pair of people, which with each, set of people sit in a room. Like, love is the easy answer, but it's not.
Well, and
not
for
the
me,
easy solution in some senses.
Has a universal application.
Yeah.
I think once you get past atonement, though, one of the things that's important to know is that after the Day of Atonement, which is, the most mournful, the most, like, literally you're supposed to beat your chest as you confess your sins. After that is a time of so much celebration that if you are in the middle of mourning a loved one, you're supposed to stop to celebrate Tabernacles. Now, again, Tabernacles is this feast that has 8 days. So it's related to resurrection. And I think so many people and so much church is obsessed with atonement. Just like the beauty of my relationship with my wife is not just the two of us going, sorry, right? Is that at some point we actually get past that forgiveness. And once we're past the forgiveness, then we get this time where we can't help but be joyful, where we're like almost commanded to be joyful and are not, like, can fully be in each other's presence.
Alan has just outed himself as our Judas.
Hey, 30 pieces is 30 pieces,
Looks,
like,
we need one. We need one.
I mean, it's like, I need the love of God now, but I'm also not rich. So when I'm rich, I might not need that anymore. So it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, for now, for here.
Lord, save me from lust, but not yet. Is that the Augustine quote? That's something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. With this, I guess I just want to be careful because we talk about, like, there's like this sort of like spirit that's behind the proposition, or that's like more fundamental than the propositions. And is that, I guess, like, I mean, maybe we've clarified it. It's like the spirit of love, but I just want to be careful that doesn't become like, that's the real, like, the thing you believe in or the thing you have faith in. And then all this other stuff is sort of like not important, or maybe that is what we're saying. But just saying like, oh, well, if you're nice and you're what we describe as loving in this space, then you're all part of our secret religion. And then you can go off into your corridor of your, like, whatever other religion, you can call yourself this, that, and the third, but that's less important than this fundamental baseline of getting into the space. So it's like the real important thing is getting into the room, is having this love that we're talking about, or this belief that we're talking about. And then where you go from there, it doesn't really matter.
The secret society where the Masonic handshake is being able to use Vervaeke's words. That's basically it.
Well, yeah.
So I don't know. We're figuring out, I think, how to maintain identitarian distinction around propositions and self-identity, while maintaining some kind of tacit, implicit unity underneath that, which is the love. Like, I don't think we need to deny what we think and what we believe about things. And that's where we can have really serious, strong-worded, earnest disagreements. But it's like, I often think of it in terms of when Jordan Peterson was talking about psychopathy with destiny. And he was saying that's the technical definition of a psychopath, is you forefront short-term gain at the expense of the relationship.
Mhm.
We should do the opposite of that. We are willing to lose the ideological idea battle, the propositional battle, for the sake of the long-term relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, and are we saying then that spirit that allows you to orient towards the long-term relationship is the spirit of love, which, despite any religion or lack of religion, anyone can have?
I mean, that's Christ consciousness is what I would call it, and I realize that's kind of a absolutizing thing, but that's also, I mean, to quote that great McLuhan quote, where Christ is the one place where the medium and the message is the same thing. That's what makes it the universal particular. And that's the whole mystery of Christ, which is Christ in me, which allows it to be universal, but also particular in every iteration.
Mhm.
I think the way I would frame it would be that the propositions lead me to practically desire and pursue loving others well. And I'm not worried about what other people are doing. Like, that's just the way it's going for me. And so I'm gonna do that. And if people want to also do that, like, sure. But these are the propositions that cause me to go this way, and I can have that conversation.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I guess it's just, I mean, I'm not like this does, but then it's like, are you closer with this group of people in the TLC who, like, let's say we all agreed, like, that love, whatever, Christ consciousness, like, that's what we want, and then we go to our churches or our synagogue or mosque, and then we're like, these guys don't have that Christ consciousness, or they don't have this instantiation of love. So I actually think of myself as more of a TLC person than a associated with my church or mosque or temple, because at TLC they prioritize the love, and here I see all these people who are nasty sinners or like nasty, mean, poopy heads, and just being careful not to be like, oh, well, the people who really understand love are on the internet, but the people who don't are at my local church.
But I think part of it is where the rubber meets the road. The idea of like long-term, short-term love. I only have to love you guys for like for how long, right? Before I can turn you off, I can move away and everything else.
As soon as I stop these streams, I just go around screaming at every member of my family. I'm like pushing them down because I've expended so much love here. All that's left is hate.
Right. No, but that is like that. You can understand that as something that, like, I have a friend and she shares with me the Jordan Peterson quotes she gets from men trying to pick her up on dating apps.
Oh man, can you share those with me?
Yeah.
Like,
wait, are those working? Because I've been sending out a lot. Could you let me know? Because I'm getting blocked a lot on every app. And
she posted
excuse me, Miss Jordan Peterson said that.
Well, where it first came up is she's talking with some guy, and he starts talking about the Pareto distribution.
Hero.
Man.
Yeah, and she's posting about this on Facebook, and this is a close friend of mine, and I send her a message and just say, I know this is tough and I know this is horrible, but please don't give up on understanding that theorem. It's very important. But like, I mean, even that this becomes an idea that people think of, that, were there no Peterson people that were just terrible men, right? Like, I know that there was a lot of misrepresentation, but there was also some representation, right? Where how much of the love of the full integration of these things are actually applied by people in their daily lives versus things they find interesting on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Well, even that is a good illustration of why we need instantiated real life practice, where, like, you can find BTLC, but then that's why Peugeot, PVK, everybody says go to church, or or go to mosque, or go to temple. Do whatever you need to do. I mean, you need to be around fully embodied people at some point. Like, this is fine as an addition or as a supplement or as a training ground or as a dojo. But like, I'm not of the mind that you can live in the metaverse.
Right.
Yeah, I would. I mean, that's like hilarious and hilariously sad, but it also shows that like, I mean, apps are just as much the internet as anything else. Like, and it just makes me sad that people don't go to church because that guy who's quoting Peterson to you, maybe there's a 50% chance. I don't know what the numbers are. 50% he's a psycho, but 50% chance he's just an awkward guy. And I think that's also like a prejudice we have of like people just suck at online interaction. They don't have that smoothness that HMath talks about. Like, you're just annihilated. Like, being talking to people means making awkward comments and being weird. Like, that's also part of it. And and unfortunately, I think a lot of people have been gifted with just a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, and a lot of young men have a little bit of knowledge, And honestly, some of those girls should text me back, because I know I let off with talking about, saving your father from the belly of the beast. But really, I just wanted to be your beast in Beauty and the Beast with me and you.
It's probably part of the Riz, isn't it? Just like
Pretty
rolling
good.
with the awkward, because you're going to be awkward at some points. But then if you can absorb that and roll with it, you're showing robustness,
Oh, yeah.
Well, I've had conversations with people about the notion of the village, because I actually have a neighbor who's right next to me who's a rather disagreeable guy, but you have to figure out a peace with your actual neighbor, where you don't have to with randos on the internet, where like there has to be a burying or going past. Like, one of the ways I think about it is, if you're in a town and there's only one guy who makes cheese and he's racist, you got to deal with you have to make peace with this racist dude. You can't cancel him, because otherwise you don't get any ricotta. That's the way that works, right? You want cheddar? Well, then get past the fact that this guy's a little bit of a douche. All right. We gotta get it right. Like, but what that is so interesting to me, though, is because then you find out that the guy who's racist has actually had more relationships with people of color than your friends who are non-racist, and you only understand that through contact, right? Like, I grew up across from Detroit, and a lot of people who had more interaction with people of color were sometimes the people that used the biggest stereotypes. It was part of that grinding, if I might state, of being in direct contact with people.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of, of that, actually meeting and interacting with people. And, I mean, it's just, I don't know, whatever. To me, it's so obvious that it's just go to church, go interact with real human beings, go actually have real relationships, and, turn off. I mean, it's funny because I don't use Instagram that much, but recently I re-downloaded it, and within like a minute, they just have your blood up. It's just, everyone is against me except my allies who I must support. Like, they're so good at just showing you exactly what there is to get your blood up, or to be like, oh, the perfect, Okay, you know what, Tayo? If the Lord calls upon me to embody a spirit of grinding, I'm not gonna hesitate to grind. Okay?
Yeah. That's why two brothers together, like ironing, sharpening iron, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a grinding.
Two brothers grinding.
Two brothers grinding.
David's a fan of Two Brothers Grinding.
Yeah.
Now we know where he's
when one is alone, who does he have to grind against?
That's so true.
Yeah, I feel like this is devolving into just Alan and McMoe's just nonstop joke fest that they had on Friday Morning Nameless.
Yeah, guys, we need to be serious. This is,
and I have to no. Joking is fine, but I'm just saying I'm gonna go soon because I have to save my voice for Pete.
Yeah.
But you guys can keep rolling without me if you want to, and then just everyone can leave when they want to, and then it will just stop.
It
This
should
is
be
like maybe a live stream is like the universe. If like human consciousness, like if there was nobody there to observe it, would it just stop being? Like if human beings didn't exist, would the world exist? Maybe it's like a live stream and all the people leave and it just goes.
Mhm. Yeah. That's what I believe about the world. When I like, turn around, it stops existing. So that's why I can mistreat everyone in my life, is because, when I stop looking at you, you won't exist, idiot. Dummy.
All right. Pete just said I should check my email. Does this mean we're not even doing it anymore? Pete's bailed on me.
Well, if this is a good place to end.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not doing it.
Okay, bye.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyhow, on that note, thanks everyone for coming. Good to see you all.
Thanks,
Hopefully we
guys.
solved some things or didn't, or we're in the
Yeah.
process of it.
Don't be afraid to grind.
Let's grind it out. This one's come to a grinding halt.
All right. See you
All
guys.
right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.